First thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna clean off my wheel head, okay? When I'm throwing standing, I put my pedal up here as opposed to on the ground, because if I'm on the ground, I'm off, right? So then my hips are off and my body's off. And while it may feel fine to do that right now, that repetition of having your body out of alignment can start to hurt. So I'm always trying to be kind of conscious of the ergonomics of what I'm doing. So that's why I have my pedal up top. When I'm throwing sitting down at a wheel, I actually put a kiln brick under my other foot so my hips are level. If you start to have any kind of back pain, we can put your wheel up to standing, or we can actually raise your wheel up so you're at it with a straight back as opposed to this kind of hunching thing over. So I'm going to start by throwing my clay down in the middle of the wheel. And I'm going to be maintaining a throwing posture. And so what that means is that my arm's gonna be tucked in at my side. When I'm standing, I'm kind of standing at a lunge, so I can use the weight of my whole body kind of as a fulcrum. When you're sitting down, you're gonna do a similar thing, but you can lock your arms into your knees. You're gonna be thinking about bending at your hips and not arching your back. Okay, and you want your forehead right over that clay body, so you're going to kind of lock in here. And the reason we're locking in is because we want to use our whole body for wheel throwing. If we're just out here and this clay is, you know, like the clay is moving my arms around, right? I want to be able to push that clay back and down. So I've thrown my clay down onto the wheel. That's why this is called wheel throwing. And now I'm going to give it some strong downward pressure. And when I'm giving that pressure, I'm using the inside of the kind of meaty parts of my hand. I'm not grabbing with my fingers. If I grab with my fingers, I'm going to start to get grooves, which are then going to capture air and make it even more difficult for this to center. So you want your hands and your clay wet, but you don't need to like hose your clay down. Most of you have some kind of splash pan that will catch some of the water. I don't throw the splash pan because it gets in my way. And so I'm trying to be really kind of conscious about how much water I use. I just want my hands to be slippery, right? So now that I've got this sealed down, okay, now I'm going to start a process called coning. And so I'm going to use the meaty sides of my hands on either side, and I'm going to push in and raise this up into a cone and then push it down. And that is going to allow me to get a little bit better control of this clay. And I'll clean up right at the edge so that I can get my hands right in here at the bottom and push this clay and bring it up into a cone. Now I'm moving my hands up the clay with the rotation of the wheel. If I come up too quickly, I'm going to start to get a spiral in the cone, and that's going to make it more off center. So if you're throwing and you are getting that spiral that's going all over, slow your hands down or slow your wheel down, okay? So now that I have it up in this cone, I'm going to clean up the floor of my wheel and using the inside part of the palm of my hand pushing down and the palm of my right hand pushing in. I'm going to work together to push this down into a centered ball of clay. Now, I am left-handed. When I'm centering, I'll do things both right-handed and left-handed. At this stage of centering, it doesn't matter which side your hands are on. So do whatever feels good to you. So I use my left hand as my kind of power hand, and I'm pushing using the whole weight of my body. And as I'm pushing down, I'm pushing back more with this outside right hand, because if I just push down, it's going to create a mushroom, right? I have to push back with some resistance on the side. And so now I can come, this is when I switch to the other side. And I'm pushing really pretty hard on the side here and then from the center out. And I'm giving it some really strong, even compression. And then I'm going to carefully release because I've just knocked that on center. And the way that I know that it's on center is that I can put my hand on it and I don't feel it wobbling around at all underneath my hands, okay? But I was putting a lot of pressure on it. So if I'm putting that really strong compression on there and then I let go, what just happened? It got off center, right? And you can see that. And that's because I just let go. What I need to do is give that strong compression and then relax my hands and then release the clay. And that's how you're going to release the clay, whether you're centering or whether you are making a pull. Anytime you're touching this clay, number one, it's always moving. The wheel is always moving. Okay, here we go. If you have a centered piece of clay or a pot on the wheel and it's not moving and you touch it, you've gotten it off center. Okay, so the wheel's always going to be moving. I'm always going to carefully release the clay. Okay, so now that I have this centered ball of clay, what do I need to do in order to make a flat slab? I need to what?
Push it down.
I need to push it down, right? So I need to push it down. I need to push it down flat. So just like when we were pinch building those plates and we slapped it, you know, we slammed it flat, we're doing the same thing here, but the piece is moving, right? So I'm going to put my hand on the side because I still do need a little bit of pressure, and I'm going to use this outside part of the palm of my hand from the center out, and I'm going to start just giving some downward pressure, and you can see it coming out. Okay, I've just run out of water and it's gotten a little sticky, so I'm going to carefully release. And I'm going to just get a little bit of moisture on there. Okay, I want to make sure that this exterior part of my wheel is pretty clean and dry, because as I push this clay out, this needs to stick to something, and if there's a lot of water there, it won't stick. So again, I'm going to start in the center and push down, and I'm going to slowly bring my hand towards me. And then I'm going to carefully release because I need a little bit more liquid. Okay, so I'll get a little more water. I am going to come out here and I'm going to compress the rim, just like we did with the plates. Okay, because we're stretching that clay out, so we want to press it back together. So again, I'm going to start there in the center and press down. And there are a couple little air bubbles that are popping as I'm bringing this clay out, and that's fine. You get a really big air bubble, you can stop your wheel and take a needle tool or a knife and pop it, and then start your wheel back up, that's fine. So again, I'm gonna come out here and compress the rim of my slab. Bless you. Okay, get a little more moisture. And so what am I doing every single time I'm making a pass like this? What's happening to the clay underneath my hand? I'm compressing it. And when we're working with flat slabs like this, we need lots of compression because we're only pressing on the one side, right? So we want to really make sure this is whenever you're making a plate, this setting up of the floor is the most important part, okay? Because we need to have that really strong compression in order to not get cracks. So I'm just going to hang out in the center there, and I'm going to bring this clay and walk this clay right out. If you start to get a piece that you have a really big wobble in your rim out here, it's because you weren't pushing enough pressure back on it to keep it on center. Okay, so that can be a challenge. I'm gonna take my ruler. I'm at about 8 inches, so that's about where I want you to be. Is I want you to be between 8 and 8.5 inches wide, and that will take you, if you have 2 pounds of clay, to a little bit thicker than 1/2 inch. But here I'm not done yet. I still need to do some more compressing. So I've stretched the clay wide. I'm just going to take my rib and I'm going to use this, just flatten this out and compress it. I could flip it over to the round side if I don't want to worry about those corners. And I'm going to hang out in the center there just a little bit, because that's where your fingers move away from first, and that's the place where it gets neglected the most in making plates. So we hang out there before we start to bring this piece out. And so I'm not really trying to make this thinner. I'm just trying to give it some pressure to make it kind of smooth, and you know, and I'll spend a few minutes just compressing this floor. Okay, carefully release, and I'm always with that rib. I'm coming in on a 30-degree angle on the side in which the clay is coming. So right now, this wheel is going counterclockwise, which means it's in the motion for a right-handed thrower, because everything now happens on the right-hand side. So if I tried to stick this in over here, it's going to get stuck and it's going to drag. So we always want to go on the right-hand side if you're right-handed. If you're left-handed, you can make the wheel go clockwise, and you can make that activity happen over here. Okay. As I said, I'm left-handed, but I throw right-handed most of the time, and that's just born out of years of teaching other right-handed people how to throw. So I'm going to come back though, and I am going to compress that rim, and I'll come back and just take any extra little bit of water. Other kind of fun things that you can do too, or you can play with the surface does here, right? So I could come and I could make a spiral into my clay, so that now when I stretch this out, if I stretch this to be an oval, it's going to stretch as well. So it's a way to kind of incorporate different elements of decoration. I'm also going to take the edge of my rib, and I'm just going to come in on an angle and get the extra slip off and make a little bit of an undercut here, and that's creating a spot for my wire tool to go, but it's also going to make this so much easier to pick up when I take this off the wheel. If it's all full of slip, it's going to be really hard to grab. So this is one way to just make a flat slab. You can think about the decoration, but we could also think about if we needed some kind of rim or rib, right? If we're thinking about how to grab something. So if we're thinking about that in this in the context of maybe a flatbread stone, and this is again a scaled down kind of version, you could take your sponge and your finger and just push this clay up a little bit, right? And so I'm essentially raising the rim a little bit, and I can compress that. I could use the corner of my tool to make a little bit of an undercut so that I'm making a shape change between the floor and this little rim or handle, right? Having a little bit of a rim can do twofold, right? It allows us to grab it, right? But it also, if this is going to be used for something other than baking on, maybe something's going to be cooked on here that has juices, that now we have a little edge that's going to keep those juices in, right? So we can think about that. So I'm going to stop my wheel now, and I'm going to take my wire tool, wrap your fingers around so it's nice and tight, just like you were flossing your teeth, really. But you want to push it tight into the floor here of the wheel, and then I'm going to pull it through just once. If there's any slack, it's going to come through, and what's going to happen? It's going to be uneven, and you can cut the bottom off. So you really want to make that be as tight as possible. Okay, so I'm just going to clean my hands up here for 1 second. It's always easier to pick something up if you have clean hands. So we've taken the slip off, so the pot is clean, and we're taking the slip off my hands. This is why I wear an apron. And then I can actually take this slab and I can pick it up and move it. Okay, and it just sticks to my hands. I'm not trying to squish it with my fingers. And so then I can just take it and I can move it onto the table. I'm gonna let that, before I would do any stretching, the piece that I stretched before,